if we haven't met before, I work with institutional ministries. I have done that now for going on 30 years. I work, almost all of my work has been with people who are dealing with addictions. Some of those people are on the street looking to stay out of institutions, but a whole lot more I've met them in institutions like rehab facilities and jail and prison. And I've gotten to really, really appreciate what they are going through, the process that they go through to keep their addiction from running their lives anymore. I've gotten to look at that and really understand, well, what they're doing is what every one of us has to do. It's what God has called every one of us to do and empowered every one of us to do, to live free from the things that dominate our lives. Anything that dominates our lives that isn't Jesus, well, he wants us free from that. This thing is, I'm sorry, here, I'm going to adjust this so it's not brushing up against my fabric of my shirt. Hopefully that'll be better. My pastor, for years, he'd clip his mic to his stole, and every time he'd move his arm, whoosh, 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 whoosh. I don't want to do that to you. This term, stinking thinking. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, and I should call your attention to the screen. Not so much for all of y'all here, but anybody who's streaming from home. If you have comments, questions, anything you'd like to chime in with, you can text at 262-374-5967. 262-374-5967. I'll try to respond to those. Okay, this term, back up here, stinking thinking, that comes out of AA and all the 12-step groups. They recognize that the problem isn't just the chemical. They're full of slogans, lots and lots of slogans. One of the slogans is, my problem was 10% alcohol and 90% me. If you spend enough time with anybody who is in recovery from addiction, you're going to hear all kinds of stories looking back at the insanity of their addictive behaviors. And looking back now, they're wondering, what was I thinking? Except there's that recognition, it made perfect sense at the time. Stuff that you look back on now and it's insane, but at the time it made perfect sense. And why did it make perfect sense? Because operating within a certain logic system, they were making logical choices. It was the logic system that was faulty. There's another one of their slogans is, my best thinking got me where I am today. So there's that recognition that it's my thinking, my best thinking. It ain't good enough. Something's wrong with the whole foundation of my thinking, and it has to be reworked. And of course, that's one of those wonderful things that our sweet Savior does for every one of us. When he brings us into his wonderful kingdom of grace, he does all these things for us that we can't do for ourselves. Can't save ourselves from consequences of sin, can't save ourselves from our own crazy thinking. And he empowers us to do that, frees us from being subject to that. I don't have it up on the screen, but Matthew chapter 6, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are good, your whole body is full of light. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? So think of it, it's our system of thinking that affects how we perceive what we're seeing, how we interact with things, how we process what we're seeing, what we're hearing. And if we got a faulty thought process, we're going to process everything all wrong. And you can probably think of instances of that from your life. I know I can. I think of, just one example popped into my mind on my way here, how several years ago I was out on the bike path that's near my home. I was out running, and I see a car coming toward me on the bike path. And I stopped, and there's a teenager behind the wheel. I just started yelling. Just went off on this girl. Because my thinking was just, how dare she? How dare you lousy kid, drive your car on this bike path and get in my way? And she broke down in tears. She was lost. She'd turned onto it by mistake. But in my thought process, I couldn't even allow for that possibility. I didn't allow for this chance of stopping and say, hey, what's wrong? Are you lost? Well, you're not supposed to be here. Did you make a wrong trip? No. All I was thinking about was my rights were being violated. Faulty thinking colored my perception, kept me from seeing this poor, confused kid. Now, that's what Jesus is looking to free us from. Now, in your handouts, I know you have, if you have that there, there's the 12 steps that Alcoholics Anonymous came up with. What I appreciate, one of the many things I appreciate from working with addicts and alcoholics is their recognition that if I'm going to be freed from this thing, running my life, it's going to take a lot more than just, I'm not going to let my drinking get to that carried away with it anymore. I promise, I mean it. That ain't going to work. It's going to take this thorough reworking of the way we think, this thorough redisciplining of the way we think. And that's reflected in the 12 steps, starting with that one about we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. Our lives had become unmanageable. Now, I'm not going to go through all of those. You might be very familiar with them anyway, but they're there for reference. Now, over the years, a lot of people who have been working recovery programs have recognized that we need those 12 steps because we've been operating with a different 12 steps. I don't know who came up with this, but the 12 steps of insanity. They go, this is one version of them I've seen. It goes, we admitted we were powerless over nothing, that we could manage our lives perfectly and those of anybody else who would allow me. We came to believe there is no power greater than ourselves, and the rest of the world was insane. We made a decision to have our loved ones and friends turn their wills and their lives over to our care, even though they couldn't understand us at all. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory of everybody we knew. We admitted to the whole world at large the exact nature of everyone else's wrongs. We were entirely ready to make others straighten up and do right. We demanded others either shape up or ship out. And we made a list of all persons who had harmed us and became willing to go any lengths to get even with them all. And we got direct revenge on such people wherever possible, except when to do so it cost us our own lives or at the very least a jail sentence. We continued to take inventory of others, and when they were wrong, promptly and repeatedly told them about it. We sought through bitching and nagging to improve our relations with others as we couldn't understand them at all, asking only that they knuckle under and do things our way, and having had a complete physical, emotional, spiritual breakdown as a result of these steps, we tried to blame it on others and get sympathy and pity in all our affairs. Okay, the recognition is that's the kind of thinking we were operating with, and that's what got us into the situation we're in today. That thought system. I appreciate that recognition of that insanity, but I also, from my perception, I thought, yes, I can see myself operating that way, and I know I've seen that in a lot of other people, but I've seen a lot of us Christians, we'll look at that and say, oh, that's arrogant, that's selfish, of course not. and fail to recognize that we have our own brand of insanity. I call it the 12 steps of shame-based insanity. And this is something I see a whole lot of us, myself included, falling into. And it goes like this. We admitted that everything was our fault, that we'd managed to screw up everything. We came to believe there was no power in heaven or earth that could help us. We made a decision to turn away from anyone and everyone who tried to love us and care for us. We made a searching and shame-filled inventory of everything that was wrong with us. We admitted to God, to ourselves, and to every other human being who would listen that we were all wrong. We were entirely ready to give up and crawl off and die. We pitifully asked God to remove us from the face of the earth. And we saw no need to make a list of the people we'd harm because we figured that pretty much everybody in the world is worse off for us being here. We whined to such people about how worthless we are, except when they managed to escape. We continued to take inventory of how bad we were and used it to increase our self-hatred. We sought through legalistic and shame-based religion to recruit God in the task of beating us up. And having gotten our self-hatred fixed for the day, we inflicted it on others and sabotaged all our affairs. Something I see happening a lot. And what happens, among many things that goes wrong there, mistaking shame for humility. I see it a lot. I've done it to myself a lot. Humility is good. Humility is a gift from God. That's healthy ways of thinking. That's release from stinging thinking. That's recognizing the reality. I'm me. There's a God, and I'm not Him. I'm finite. I'm limited, and that's okay. Recognize my limitations, etc. That's humility. Shame is all about I'm a mistake. I don't belong here. I'm worthless. I'm not worthless. You're not worthless. Nobody's worthless. We're worth the blood of the Son of God. Ain't nobody worthless. Do we have bad, horrible things wrong with us? Absolutely. Do we deserve heaven? No. But here's our God saying, deserve? I didn't talk about deserve. Who's talking about deserve? I'm talking about love, not deserve. Will you get off this deserve thing? But I'm such a poor, miserable sinner. That can be another form of insanity. And also, if you have thoughts or questions at any point, please wave frantically. And same thing for anybody streaming from home, text frantically. Now, because we're part of God's wonderful kingdom of grace, He frees us to look at our thinking and to say, what's wrong with my thinking? What was I thinking? And can I think differently? 2 Corinthians, I meant to show you that here. Madness. All that insanity we go through. And I don't know where I found this, but I like that slogan. Madness does not always howl. Sometimes it is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, hey, is there room in your head for one more? That quiet insanity we have as we sink into despair farther and farther. I'm so miserable and I'm so worthless and I can't do anything right and I never ever will. That's not God's will for us. God wants to free us from that. Okay, so here, 2 Corinthians 10:5, Paul the Apostle says, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Recognizing this isn't just talking about, we're going to go out there and we're going to convince those people who are opposing us. This is about taking captive our own thoughts. Every pretension in us that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And make it obedient to Christ. Now, you notice this. It does not say, back up here. He didn't say make it obedient to the law. this is about being obedient to Christ. And think about what that means, being obedient to Christ. So instead of being obedient to the voice of shame, instead of being obedient to the voice of self-importance and entitlement, or any of those other crazy things, obedience to Christ. And this is not so much Christ the lawgiver or anything like that. It's this Christ who loves me. Being obedient to him when he says, will you just let me love you? Well, when I let him love me, I'm being obedient to him. When he says, will you believe me when I tell you I forgive you? That's being obedient to Christ. And when he says, follow me down this path of freedom, this path of love and freedom from shame, ability to enjoy the world I made, that's obedience to Christ. One of the things, take this home with you if you don't take anything else home. Phil Merton, rule number 1 for sane living. I have a whole list of rules for sane living, but this is my number 1. Being right with God is not your goal. Being right with God is your starting point. Okay, keep that in mind. This is where I start from every day, no matter how good I've done, how bad I've done, no matter what. My starting point is, I'm right with God. I'm loved by God. God couldn't love me any more than he loves me right now. That's my foundation I start from. I'm not down in a hole trying to climb out. Never. I'm starting from this wonderful place. I'm right with God. Now I can build on that. And watch the sane thinking that God gives us when you start there. Okay, so go back to that phrase, being obedient to Christ. Now, what does that look like? A life of obedience to Christ. I'm going to throw out a couple of things here. I'm open to being loved and to giving love. I'm aware of the good things in life and I'm grateful for them. Enjoying life, enjoying the world around us. That's part of being obedient to Christ. Remember how Jesus pointed out that the Pharisees were faulting him because he liked to get together with people. He liked to have a good time with people. He enjoyed people's company. I saw just recently a Lutheran pastor in New York was talking about the problem. One of the many problems for us Christians that comes about with the isolation, the rules about not social distancing, etc. She pointed out that the difficulty of getting together for the Lord's Supper. And she said, eating and drinking is such a big deal for Christians, not just in the Lord's Supper, but I'd never thought of this before, pointed out in the Gospels. Jesus was always going to eat with somebody. He was eating with somebody or he was coming away from eating with somebody. That's a little exaggeration, but only a little exaggeration. He was always eating. Eating was such an important part of what Jesus was doing on earth. And for all of us, eating. And enjoying it. So, freedom to be obedient to Christ, part of it is enjoying life. Also, believing I am infinitely valuable and completely lovable. Now that goes directly against that shame-based insanity. But that's biblical. That's extremely biblical. I am infinitely valuable. Jesus dies for me. What does that say about my value? Lovable? Well, if he loves me, I must be lovable. It isn't about some intrinsic thing about me because I'm so cute or anything like that. It's about he has a loving heart and he's pointing that loving heart at me. So, wow, check it out. I'm loved. I'm lovable. Instead of looking at ourselves as shame. I believe the people who have hurt me are as valuable as I am. So much of what Jesus said about forgiving people, not taking vengeance, and all of that, it comes from that recognition of not only am I infinitely valuable, but so is everybody around me, including the people that hurt me. Obedience to Christ. I'm a stranger to shame. I don't have to live in that. I'm a poor, miserable sinner. That is my identity. We don't have to live under that. That's not God's will. That's not obedience to Christ, I don't believe. And I'm free to explore the fascinating things of the world God has created for me. And we don't have to just say, I'm looking forward to heaven. Of course I'm looking forward to heaven, but I'm not there yet. Meanwhile, I'm on this world, and there's a lot of nice things God has put in this world. And God has told me, go ahead, explore. And I realize my emotions are a gift from my loving God. I'm not afraid to experience them. I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry. All of those gifts from God, and don't have to live in fear of them. And this is a biggie. I'm talking to myself with this one. I seek help when I need it, and I give help when needed. Okay, I'll give help. In fact, I go overboard with that. I'll say yes to anything, and then I overcommit myself. But asking for help, not me. I never, well, that's an exaggeration, but I'm bad at thinking of asking for help. One time, it just sticks in my memory how I was at my church on a Friday night for our recovery group, and I was moving some equipment, a projector and my computer, etc., from upstairs to our meeting room downstairs, lugging it down the steps, and my friend Charlie was standing at the bottom of the steps, cup of coffee, watching this, and he says, "Hey, Phil, do you want any help?" I was like, wow, what a novel idea. I honestly hadn't thought of it. I don't think about asking for help. Here's a guy perfectly ready to give help. And just never occurred to me, just not part of my thinking. My mother, my late mother, we were just talking about her, she reached a point in her life where she didn't, well, she could drive, she was fine with driving, but she never liked it. And my car died, and she finally gritted her teeth, said, you know, here I have this car, and I'm not using it. You don't have a car, and you need one. Here, take my car. And that left her without a car, which for the most part was fine, except she was a genuine little old lady who only drove her car to church on Sundays. That was literally it. She drove her car to church on Sundays. So now she had to ask for a ride. And she didn't want to do that. She felt like a beggar. She just didn't, but she did. And she told me, this is great. People want to give me a ride. People are happy to give me a ride. They enjoy my company, and I enjoy their company. This is great. That's, I believe, part of this being obedient to Christ. Giving help and taking help. And you could go on and on. What does it mean to be obedient to Christ? Any other ideas? What does being obedient to Christ look like? Just kick it around. You don't have to answer it now, but start to think about it. You know, it's not just, I know I should act more like a Christian. No. You know, being obedient to Christ, I believe it, well, actually, any thoughts on that before I jump away from this? One of the things Jesus said here, I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, that wasn't a threat. That wasn't what it was about. He was just telling us the kingdom of heaven is about enjoying love. if you don't enjoy love, heaven ain't heavenly. And he used kids to get us thinking, well, what would that be like? What is kingdom of heaven, thinking and living, what is it like? Oh, being like a little kid. And, think about that. I think that's one of the ways to look at being obedient to Christ. Oops, back up here. So, opposite of stinking thinking, I think, would be a whole lot like living like a little kid. Looking at life like a little kid, enjoying what's coming along. Everything is new, everything is wonderful. Never carrying a burden of, I should be doing so much more, etc. Any thoughts come to you when you think of becoming like little children to enter the kingdom? Have you ever thought about that? What have you noticed with kids and the way they live that you'd like to be more like? Anything that comes to your mind? Think of little kids in your life. What would you say? Man, I wish I'd be more like that kid. Have my, if you have, is anybody coming from what? Okay.
No online comments, but
You got one?
people are free to again put in a post to the chat or our phone number, which is 262-374-5957.
Right.
I guess I'll just throw out there for you.
Jump
Kids
in.
don't have baggage. They don't.
Yeah.
They don't enter every new situation or new relationship with the baggage from before. Generally.
Great point, yeah. One of those things Jesus loved to talk about, that today is today. Live in this day. Tomorrow, no, there's a whole nother day. Yeah, don't be dragging stuff around. Good point. We're freed from that baggage. Learn from it, but I'm not going to try to atone for it today. Jesus did that work for me. I don't have to do that. Okay. I just think of I have two living grandsons, and one of them is, he just turned 10 months old. He was at our house the other day, and he sat down on the floor. You can't walk, he's just crawling, but he sat down with some cars, and man, he could just enjoy himself for, I don't know, I didn't time him, but just pushing a car and making motor noises. Just a simple thing like that. He was just fascinated with it. Skilled kid, too. He doesn't make motor noises with the lips. He rolls his R's. He's 10 months old. In the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a section where they explain a little bit about what you can see happening or what their experience at least had been as they work a program of rethinking life and getting away from the stinking thinking. And it's sometimes called the 12 Promises. It's not listed that way in the big book, but a lot of people have taken them and put them this way. And I think it's one way of looking at what does it mean to have childlike thinking. This is the way that they put it in AA. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. That one just hits me every time I see it. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. I'm not looking at it with shame, the baggage that you talked about. I'm looking at it, yeah, that's real. I did that, it was wrong. And I'm not living in regret for it. Jesus took care of that. I don't have to say, I don't want to think about that. Yeah, I do want to think about that. There's value in looking at that. We will comprehend the word serenity. We will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we've gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. No such thing as a wasted life. Feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We'll lose interest in selfish things, gain interest in our fellows. That's AA, the book was written in late 1930s, so have a lot of interesting language in there. Fellows. Number 8, self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. That's another one that hits me. What are the things that I'm most scared of? What are people thinking of me? What am I scared of? What if the money gets funny? And saying these things aren't going to dominate our lives anymore. We'll intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us. And we'll suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. I think great example of what does it mean to have this childlike way of thinking. I think they broke it down really nicely. And then they add this at the end. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They're being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They'll always materialize if we work for them. Okay, there's a process involved. It doesn't happen overnight. It took us a while to get into the crazy ways of thinking that we have now. And learning a new way of thinking, learning to think sanely, that's going to take a while too, and that's okay. I was just sharing before another story about my mom. She loved music, sang all the time. She played piano. She picked up guitar when she was a kindergarten teacher. And then, just a few years before she died, she learned how to play the ukulele. And about the time she died, she was starting to play the harmonica. But she told me, when I get to heaven, I'm going to play the cello. And I'm going to play the cello. I'm not going to learn to play the cello. I'm going to play the cello. That was what she was convinced of. I've wondered since then what happened when my mom got to heaven. Did she get her cello and just start right in and playing? Or did Jesus hand her cello and say, okay, Martha, your first lesson is tomorrow morning? And if that's the case, I believe that, and I'm kind of thinking that's how it works. She has to go through the process, same as here. But the difference is there, in heaven, we'll appreciate the process, I think. We're going to say, oh, this is great. What was my hurry? This is wonderful. I'm thinking that sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, the materialize of going through a process to get something. In our stinking thinking, we're thinking, oh, this is such a drag. I just want to be done with it. And here's God saying, what's your hurry? I take my time with things. Didn't create the world by snapping my fingers. It took 6 days to create it. To say I forgive you and mean it took centuries of work, culminating with my son dying on the cross. Now, what's your hurry? So to get to thinking, it's okay. I don't have to be in a hurry. I think that's another aspect of being out of our stinking thinking sanely. Let's see, hang on a second. Okay, now, stop there for a minute. Anything come in over?
We just had one comment come through when we were talking about having a childlike faith, and you were asking for examples of how children have good, faith. And so the comment was just living in the present, that children live in the present. And so
living in the present, yeah.
Yeah.
That is so much of what Jesus talked about, living in the present. You remember all of that in the Sermon on the Mount. Don't be thinking about tomorrow. Don't get ahead of yourself. Kids are so good at that. Living in the present. That was another thing. When my kids were tiny, we lived in South Florida, and one time we drove from down in South Florida to my wife's family's in Michigan, and my family was in Waukesha. And we did the drive. We did it all in one shot one time. That's a young person's game. I can't do that anymore. But for a kid, my son was, what was he? About maybe 20 months old, maybe not quite there. He was, anyway, we bought a bag of toys for them. And every hour or so, we dole out a new toy for each one of them, just to keep them going. I found with my son, we'd give him a toy, and he'd be all happy with it, and we'd be playing with it, and after a while, he'd set it down, and found we could just retrieve it, and an hour later, give it to him again. Oh, here's a toy, I'm really happy about this. We could just repeat that over and over. We overbought for him. It's just so easy to please. He was living in the present. It's new to me, and new to me is fine. Anything else start to come to you is what does freedom from stinking thinking look like? What is a life of obedience to Christ and living in that freedom? What does it look like? Okay. Let's see, I don't know if this is coming up on your slides. I'm going to give you a quick look at some of the things that I want to cover in what is stinking thinking. Good to start out with thinking, what does freedom look like? And then let's take a look at what are we being freed from? Let's see, is that on here? No, it's not on there. Okay, no problem. I'm just going to give you a quick rundown. Here's some of the things that we'll be looking at next week. Okay, everything that's the opposite of what freedom in Christ, what living in the freedom of a child is like. Some examples that we're going to look at in more depth. Victim stance, living as a constant victim of everybody else's bad choices. Entitlement. Magical thinking. Maybe you've heard that term before. That if I want it enough, it'll happen. It'll happen just because I want it. Just because I made a promise, that'll make it happen. Magical thinking. Pseudo-integrity. I'm one of the good guys. Never mind my actions, at least I'm not like them. Control and power worship. Terminal uniqueness. That's a term that comes up a lot in recovery groups. Terminal uniqueness. I'm different. The normal rules don't apply to me. Either I'm better than everybody or I'm worse than everybody. I don't need any help or I'm beyond help. Terminal uniqueness. Shortcut thinking, quick fix orientation. Criminal excitement. I like doing it because I'm not supposed to do it. Perfectionism. That's something we're going to have to look at long because I know sometimes we Christians get into this perfectionistic thinking without realizing it. It's bad. God's perfect, but He's not a perfectionist. But boy, so easy to think it's all good or it's no good. Impulsivity, another obvious problem. And then the queen mother of them all, judgmentalism. That one, for my money, I'm thinking that is the number one killer. I'll mention this again next week, but you've probably heard the saying that the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. And I don't know who said that. I think that's Gandhi or Mother Teresa or somebody who like that. I think of it this way, and I might not even be disagreeing with it. I might be just stating it a different way. The opposite of love, I think, is judgmentalism. That you look at everybody and you evaluate them. How valuable is that person? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Do they measure up? Do I measure up? I believe that's the opposite of love, and God has called us into a life of love. I think the most underrated, one of the most underrated Bible verses is the one where Jesus says, "Do not judge and you won't be judged." avoiding that, because that's, like I said, the queen mother of stinking thinking for, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, anything else that occurs to you, or anything else from all the streaming folks? Okay. Well, in that case, I'd like to wrap up with a prayer. Anything in particular we should pray about that to bring to before the Lord as long as we're together? Okay. Lord, you're the God who gives freedom, and you're a God who lives in freedom. Nobody tells you what to do. Nobody puts you under law. You don't carry baggage around. And you said, we're your children. Lord, sometimes we're so bound up in faulty thinking we can't even see it. The things we're doing make perfect sense, but only because what we think is sane is insane. Help us out of that, Lord God. Help us to see what real freedom is like, what real kingdom living really looks like. Help us to recognize it and strive for it and take every thought captive. And we live in a world of people that are so stuck in thinking that they're not loved, thinking that love has to be earned, thinking that some people aren't lovable. Help us to show this poor, stuck world something different. Praying for your help, praying for your presence, praying that all the people that we know right now who are really hurting, that you'd be there for them. Praying for your guidance for the people who are looking for treatment and vaccines, and all the people who are presently suffering with the disease. And we're asking for all this in your sweet name, Jesus, our Savior. Amen. Okay, thanks a lot for letting me be with you today.